The March primary elections are right around the corner, and with just 3 days left for Texans to cast their ballots early, new polling from the Texas Politics Project at UT Austin is showing who might have an advantage in several key races. Dr. James Henson, Executive Director of the Texas Politics Project, is joining us to talk about the numbers. Dr. Henson, thank you for your time.
Great to be back with you, Ashley.
The first question is always the same. Tell us who you talk to, when you talk to them, how you talk to them.
It's a little more complicated than usual. We talked to 1,300 self-declared registered voters in Texas overall, but to get estimates for these election races, we also supplemented that with a pool of what we are calling likely primary voters. These are Democrats and Republicans who report having voted in at least one of the last three party primaries and say that they're planning to vote in a party primary this time. So we have larger margins of error on that race, depending on how many responses, around 5, depending on the race. Overall margin of error is about 2.5, 2.75 or so.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Up until now, we've been talking about favorability ratings, which you still asked about this time, but you all did head-to-heads this time around, right?
That's correct. And that's where we deployed these likely primary voter samples.
All right, so let's get into the numbers because they are interesting to say the least. We're going to start talking about the Senate race. It's the big race that everybody's talking about. Let's start with the Republicans. Some might say this is a tied race we have here.
Yeah, and some would be right because, in this race we had about a 5.25 margin of error. So we had John Cornyn at 36%. I'm sorry, Ken Paxton at 36%, John Cornyn at 34%, Wesley Hunt at 24%, a smattering among some other candidates. And with that margin of error, it's fair to say this is a tied race. And this has been a close race all along, and the polling has moved around and will continue to move around. People should remember, I didn't mention this at the outset, but we were collecting this data February 2nd through the 16th. So, it's been 8 or 9 days now since we collected the data. Just in that interval, there's been a lot of money spent, a lot of ads aired, and in this race, a lot of nasty attacks made.
Yeah, and new ads even out today, but certainly Hunt's team, I'm sure, are happy to see those numbers because it's a boost for him compared to some previous polling that we've seen. Let's get to the Democrats. Jim, tell us about the numbers there.
Well, that's a very interesting result, too, but also one that we want to sort of keep in mind the timing. We found Jasmine Crockett leading by 12 points, 56-44. I think there's two things to note about this race. One, very quickly, this was, as the Talarico campaign is quick to point out, and many of his supporters, before the whole blow-up with Stephen Colbert, which got Talarico a lot of positive attention and put him in a positive context, and helped him something he needs, which is the second point here. The story of this race in a lot of ways is that Jasmine Crockett started with very high name recognition and very high positive, favorable views among Democratic voters in the state. James Talarico was much less well known when he started, so he's been trying to had to do two things. He's been trying to convince people to vote for him, but he's also having to introduce people. And even in this poll at this late date, about 1 in 3 Democratic voters in the sample overall didn't have a view of Talarico. So he's still trying to introduce himself to a pretty big chunk of voters, and he's running out of time.
We have to point out that his team also put out a poll today. They put out a memo today and showing that he's leading in this race by a sizable margin. What would you say to folks who say, okay, wait a minute, 2 competing polls done around the same time, which one should I believe?
Well, I would say 2 things. I mean, they shouldn't believe any individual poll. We always say the more polling, the better. In this case, I would say that poll had a larger sample and a smaller margin of error than the poll that we did, and that's to be taken seriously. But I would also have to say that this is a campaign that was paid for, produced, and distributed by a campaign. And it's very rare that any campaign puts together a data set and releases a poll that they think is not in their favor. And so there is a question at all times about any campaign polling, is that it's an interested result. We don't have a dog in the fight. We're trying to get the best estimate we can with the resources we have. That's honestly not true of a campaign poll. So I'm not saying the poll was bad or wrong, but the poll has been selectively released by somebody that is interested in the campaign. And I would just urge your viewers to take that into account.
Yeah, certainly worth mentioning. There are so many races that you guys talked about that we didn't get a chance to chat about, from the Attorney General's race to governor. Tell folks where they can find all the latest numbers.
Yeah, you'll find all of the data and with full disclosure and with sample sizes and margins of error. And there's a lot of voters not interested in those lower ballot races, but you'll find them at texaspolitics.utexas.edu. Lots of links in the front page, including to a podcast discussing the Senate race.
Yeah, or you can just Google Texas Politics Project, or hey, KVUE.com. You know, we're going to link it for you. Thank you so much, Dr. Henson, for taking some time out to talk with us.
Always great to be with you, Ashley.